Here we are with episode 17 of 84 Feet with Cady and Cap. I'm Brian Cady, along with the well-traveled Albany Academy girls varsity basketball coach Brian Capitula. Have you recovered from your jet lag yet, or are you still trying to figure out where you are and what time it is?
Yeah, I don't think there's a way to recover. I think it's just a matter of just letting days go by. But it was a fun thing to do. But it's 14 days of just basketball, so it's a lot. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of getting a regular routine down. You never know when you're getting back to the hotel. So, but it's a fun activity. It's fun to see the kids compete. So.
Yeah, you're at Spooky Nook. I always struggle for saying that for some reason. Spooky Nook. There we go. Out in Ohio, and then you basically came home for a long enough time to wash your laundry, repack, and go back out to Chicago. So
that was it.
Wild, crazy. Yeah. How's your credit card feeling? Is it flaming hot in your wallet still? Or is it all right?
I was hoping that I brought cash with me in Chicago just because I've had fraud stuff pop up because you're in Chicago. So they had a credit card. That whole credit card malfunction thing happened. I think the day that we checked in, like that night, we checked in at like 1 a.m. So that was that morning. So some of us haven't been charged yet, but I'm sure we will get charged.
Listen, any kid that I come across, I still tell them cash is king. I don't care what year it is, cash is always king. The New York State Public High School Athletic Association may not agree with the way they have things right now, but hey, I'm not going to go too far into that one. Anyways, two of my favorite people in all Section 2 are joining us today. One, because I admire like crazy the way he coaches and the program he's put together, and the other, well, I have to say that about him because he's basically my boss for 6 weeks out of the year. That all being said, it's time to bring on the girls basketball varsity head coach and the athletic director of Averill Park. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Sean Organ and the incomparable Mark Bubniak. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us on.
Doing well, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone want to guess who the boss was that I had to talk nice? I'm just kidding. So first off, let's just jump right into let me just jump into the big topic that I already warned Mark about bringing up, and Sean, you can jump in if you have an opinion too. The news that Averill Park is going to be changing mascots and team nicknames effective for the academic year 2025-2026, going from the Warriors to the Golden Knights. First of all, can't imagine where Golden Knights came from. Not a clue. But, Mark, just kind of walk us through that process, how long it took to have this conversation, come up with the new name, and just overall how the process you think went. Was it heated at all or anything like that? What was going on with that?
Sure. The process basically took this whole past school year. We had our student athlete advisory council in conjunction with the student leadership group at the high school. We worked on forming surveys, coming up with options. I think we ended up doing 3 surveys out to the community and kept narrowing down the options. And then it really came down to, at the end, Golden Knights and Lakers were the top 2, and ultimately Golden Knights was the winner. So that was really this past year, just kind of going through the process and figuring out what we had to do, because ultimately by July 1st of 2025, we have to be, no longer the Warriors and transition to the Golden Knights. And this coming year will be more working on logos, word marks, crests, seals, all of those things, still with that same student group. So we are ready to transition throughout this year. We'll still be the Warriors this year, but ready to transition at the end of this year, because as you can imagine, there's a lot that needs to be done as far as, we have Warriors written or a spear on, gym floors, on the track, on wall pads, on probably at least 25% of our uniforms, wrestling mats. I mean, you name it, it's there. So it's not only a big time commitment from a lot of people to change, but it's also a big, financial commitment. And unfortunately, just like a lot of mandates from the state, we're mandated to change, but there's no money associated to, help us make that change.
Now, for you guys, this can be, but for both of you guys together, and Sean, you can answer it from a coaching side, and then Mark from an athletic director side. You guys have both been like in your positions for quite a while. Have you seen any big change, like with athletes, most recently, like with athletes either sticking to one sport or athletes being more, like, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but like staying with one sport rather than kind of branching out. We all used to be like multi-sport athletes. Has it become where everyone's kind of picking one sport by a certain age group?
I've certainly seen that with some of our players that I've coached over, my time at Averill Park. But I would say that in general, we are fortunate that we have, many student athletes that play two, some of them play three sports. And I think that, at a school the size of Averill Park, it's important that, not only do we encourage that, but, we support the kids when it's not, in our instance, basketball season, and they move on to softball or they move on to lacrosse. In the fall, we have girls on our team who play soccer and volleyball. And that's important. Certainly, over the years, we've had players who, specialize. Taylor Houlihan, is the most recent player, to come to mind before her. Amelia Wood grew up, playing multiple sports, volleyball, softball, and basketball. Ultimately, I think for some kids, they reach a point where they decide that they want to go all in. And I get it. That makes sense for certain players. But, for a district our size, I think it's really important that we continue to encourage and support, our student athletes playing two or three sports.
And I would agree with Sean. At a school our size, it's important. We're not the size of Shenandoah, Albany, schools like that where we can have kids just play one sport. The majority of our athletes here play two sports. We do have some kids that play three, but the majority are two sport athletes. And I think that's, extremely important. I think the other thing here is, and, Sean can attest to this, I think our coaches work really well together, both on the girls and on the boys side of sharing student athletes, not being too protective of them, working, hey, it's the off season. Well, it might be the springtime. Well, boys basketball coaches are coordinating with our football and soccer coaches to make sure they're not setting up off-season workouts at the same time. So I think we're lucky here at Averill Park to have multiple sport athletes. But in the general sense of youth sports and high school sports, from my time, I'm going into my 16th year as an athletic administrator, and I've definitely seen more kids overall specialize. And I think they're getting that information. And I don't think it's the college coaches per se that are telling them, hey, just if you're a basketball player, just play basketball. Because I use the example all the time. When I was coaching at Maple Hill, Coach Cady Roth, who was a Division I basketball player, played for Jen Rosati at the University of Hartford. And she also, and again, small school at Maple Hill, but she also played volleyball, and she was a thrower on our track and field team. And even though she played AAU basketball in the spring, she worked it out where she could still go to meets and get her throws in and still, compete on her AAU basketball team. I remember distinctly sitting on a phone conversation with her and one of the assistant coaches at the University of Hartford saying, we want you to be on the track team. We don't want you telling your high school, hey, I can't run track or I can't throw on the track team because I have to play AAU basketball. Unfortunately, I think, some parents think that maybe, a lot of parents think that their kid's going to be a Division I athlete. Hey, we got to concentrate on this, where that's not the case. We want kids to have well-rounded experiences and, play multiple sports, because ultimately, as we know, the studies show that playing multiple sports is going to help you in your primary sport as well.
Now, Mark, I just have one follow-up question from how we opened stuff regarding the name change.
Sure.
Because obviously there's other schools that have gone through the process. Schoharie went through it, become the Storm Colony. They had to adjust from being the Garnet Raiders. Cambridge is going through the same stuff right now. Fonda, Fultonville. Was everything completely in-house as far as your discussions, or did you reach out to any of these other schools that already gone through the process or were going through the process at the same time as you to just kind of get a little insight into, how they went about things or what they were thinking about everything going on?
Yeah, I think we kind of liked how we did things, and we talked, internally throughout the processes. We weren't the first school to go through it. We weren't the first one to decide on a name change. Some had already changed their names for this school year, but we weren't the last either. There's other schools that are kind of still slow playing it and waiting to see if anything happens where maybe they won't have to change. So we're kind of in the middle. And I know, our superintendent has talked to other superintendents that have gone through it. I've talked to other athletic administrators. We did in one of our meetings with the student groups, because one of the more exciting parts of this for them is this coming year where we can choose a mascot, choose a new logo that can be in conjunction with our primary AP logo. So we actually showed them, Lake George transitioned to the Lakers, and they worked with an outside group. I think it was Jostens they worked with to create all of their logos and have a really nice packet of their color schemes, their alternate logos, their main logos, word marks, all of that. So we did kind of show the kids that back in the probably late winter, early spring, what we'll be working on this coming year to kind of get them excited that, hey, they're going to have an opportunity. These kids are going to have an opportunity to kind of help transition Averill Park for the, many years to come.
Now, I think me and Brian kind of know some of your background, but at least we want to kind of get some background, at least for you, Sean. How many years have you been coaching either boys basketball, girls basketball, whatever it might be, and kind of how did that whole journey start?
Yeah, so I've been a teacher now. I started with Lansingburg in the fall of 2000, and I've been coaching all but 1 year, either boys or girls, which includes a little bit of, believe it or not, women's soccer up at Adirondack Community College. And I also coached men's JV basketball at RPI under Coach Griffin. So I'm entering my 25th year as a teacher. So 24 out of those 25 years, I've been a coach.
That's great.
So it's interesting. Your coaching tree includes Griff as well as the two guys you played under at St. Rose for 3 years, and Brian Bury and Don Bassett. That's an okay coaching tree, I suppose. Just not bad.
Don't forget Will Brown either, because Will was there my first year. When I entered my sophomore year, which was the first year that I transferred to St. Rose. And when I think back about that first year, the 97-98 season, 97-98 school year at St. Rose, my earliest experience is just getting involved with the guys who were already on campus. A lot of those, epic, iconic St. Rose players had just graduated. Garth Joseph, Ralph Bucci, Roger Powers, and they had an incredible run the season before, but they were still around campus. And some of the best basketball that I've ever been exposed to was that summer where guys from Union and RPI and Siena, we'd all just kind of meet at St. Rose or over at Siena, and we would just play pickup basketball. And it was really the most intense, highest, most competitive level of basketball that I've been exposed to. And, when you get involved with coaches like Coach Bury, Coach Brown, Coach Bassett, it just takes it to a different level. And I look back on those days really fondly, and there's no question that's had an impact on the way that I coach today.
Now, you mentioned a very poignant name to me, because I remember around the age of 8 or 9 going to a few different St. Rose summer basketball camps, and just randomly one day, Coach Bury decides to have a couple of his players come in, and we're all sitting on the floor, and then this ginormous human being walks in. I'm like, they grow him that tall? It was Garth Joseph. And then I never saw him again until 2 decades later, when all of a sudden he's an assistant coach at Bryan and Stratton with Pat Philly. And I'm like, Oh, you're still that tall. That's cool. Like, did seeing the guy that big and knowing how talented he was, like was that like a mental like disturbance for you to when you got to see him at all?
There's no doubt that Garth is definitely a presence, when you're out there on the court. And if you don't know him, which, when I transferred into St. Rose, I didn't really know too many people when I came in, just running and playing and trying to figure out, how am I going to get around this guy? How am I going to get past him? How am I going to box him out? That was an incredible experience. But, very quickly, anybody who spent any time with Garth knows that he is just an incredible human being, very sincere, very nice. And, it's too bad, too, because I know that they had put in a request to try to get one more year to play. And I know that if the NCAA had approved that, who knows? I mean, that would have been, as it was, in 98, we had advanced to the NCAA Division II Elite Eight and then won a crazy game, to go to the Final Four where we lost to UC Davis, who went on to win the national championship the next day. If Garth's, on that roster, who knows? But yeah, he's just an awesome, and all those guys really were. I mean, Ralph Bucci, quiet but determined and just played, just really intense, very focused basketball. Roger Powers, who I see occasionally, through the basketball circuit, just the way that these guys went about their business and the way that these guys played was just a truly incredible experience during, that golden era really at St. Rose.
Mm-hmm. This question is from Mark. So Mark, obviously, you're in charge of most of if not most, but the Section 2, at least for the girls basketball side, and getting all that stuff done. How has that process evolved in the last years that you've been there? Like, has the process become simple to you, or is it something there's challenges every year? Like when you get to the postseason play and getting that stuff squared away?
Yeah, good question. But one thing back to the St. Rose basketball camp. Fun fact: I also went to the St. Rose basketball camp when I was younger, and my JV basketball coach in high school at Maple Hill, Scott Hanrahan, he played for Coach Bury over at St. Rose, and I know Coach Organ knows Coach Hanrahan. So he got a bunch of us to go to camp, and actually Coach Bury asked us, a bunch of us from Maple Hill, to be in a commercial for the St. Rose camp. So we were in a commercial one year, and believe me, I did not win any Emmy Awards or anything for my acting abilities, but that was a nice thing to be able to do. But to answer your question, I got on the Section 2 basketball committee my first year coaching varsity girls basketball at Maple Hill. So that was in 2007. I was just telling our superintendent this story the other day. I literally went to our first league meeting. It was down in Chatham back in 2007, and Terry Bordell was the coach at Chatham, and he was the Patroon Conference rep. And we got to our first meeting, and he said, "I'm stepping down as the Patroon Conference rep. I will no longer be on the Section 2 basketball committee. Mark, being the newest coach here, this is now your job." So along with being a first-year varsity coach, I was also the Patroon Conference rep. But I would say being on the Section 2 girls basketball committee, loved every minute of it. As I was coach for my 7 years at Maple Hill, I was the Patroon Conference rep. And then I was lucky enough when Pete Bly was the coordinator for Section 2 girls basketball, and then Dan Heitko took it over for a couple of years. Even though I transitioned from, working as a teacher, coach, and athletic administrator at Maple Hill to coming over here to Averill Park in 2014, I was still an at-large member on the committee. And then when Dan Heitko stepped down, I took over as the chairperson back in 2019, which was an interesting year because take over in 2019, we have sectionals in 2020, and Coach Organ could speak to this as well. We go up to Potsdam to play a sub-regional basketball game, win that game pretty handily, and come back 2 days later and have to walk into a gym and tell a team that we're not going to a regional final in Syracuse that Saturday, and I don't know if we're going to continue the basketball season. which we, as you know, we ultimately didn't. Which, as I tell everyone, that was probably one of the toughest things I ever had to do, was go tell a state championship caliber team that you're not going to be able to continue your season. Awful moment. I'll remember that forever. But obviously, that being a coordinator at that time and your first year being the coordinator, very, very interesting, and you never knew what was going to happen from day to day to week, and even into the next season. The next season we go in and we're wearing masks and everything, and it's a shortened season, and you only play a league schedule, and everybody's asking me as the coordinator what's going to happen, and I'm at the mercy of what the state says, and not only what NISFA says, but what the state health department says and everything. So it was an interesting first couple of years, but I think being 3-4 years out of COVID and having a set routine and everything, and our committee pretty much stays the same. And Sean and Brian know our league reps very rarely change. I mean, you got Joe Murphy, Eric Doomer, Tom Galvin, Scott Smith, Steve Giglio, Jason Slater. All of these people are people that have been on the committee forever, and even our at-large people that people don't know what they do behind the scenes, like Dan Heiko, Frank Akello, Cassie Chapko, Sarah Warner, who's still on our committee, and she was the secretary forever, but still wants to be part of it. Karen Bonatanabis, does a great job with Scholar Athlete. All of these committee people make my job easy. Yeah, I'm the face of the organization. They make me look good, but it's really all their work behind the scenes that makes it a smooth go for us.
And Karen at one point was also the state tournament coordinator for a little while before Tim Lincoln took over recently.
Yes. Karen was the state tournament director. And she worked very hand in hand with Tim. And then, Jason took over from Karen when Karen stepped down. And Jason does it's great to have somebody from Section 2 doing that. Jason, I don't know how he does it between coaching a team that's usually a sectional championship worthy team or farther, and then also running the entire state tournament. He does an awesome job.
And you brought up a very good core memory that I want to run past Sean as well. That whole COVID thing in 2020, because I also vividly remember I announced a sub-regional game at Saratoga High that Tuesday night, and then next morning I'm turning on to watch the first day of the ACC basketball tournament, and they're canceling everything. I'm like, oh, that's not good. So for you, what was that like? I mean, obviously you have all the emotions of all the girls that are in the gym, but for you as the coach who, along with Mark, is obviously trying to, comfort these girls, and, unfortunately, there's not much to understand about it except it is what it is. It's a pandemic. What was that moment like for you as a coach to have to go through that with the girls and with Mark?
I mean, the word that comes to mind was painful. That team, that season, was one of the best teams that I've ever coached. We were deep. We were talented. We had incredible guard play. I loved where we were at defensively. We were really holding teams down. I think to make any kind of serious postseason run, you have to be deep. You have to be able to overcome, officiating on the road. I didn't really, looking forward, to who was still left. I felt very confidently that we had a great shot at, becoming a state champion that year. And I think the girls felt that. I think the girls understood, that this was a great opportunity in front of them. And it came on suddenly. I know that it sounds kind of silly in hindsight, but it came on suddenly. And I remember distinctly we were kind of going through, the middle third of what I had, in our practice plan that day. And I got a text message from my former assistant coach, Mike Cavada, who is now, and I'd like to congratulate Mike because he's just been named the varsity girls basketball coach up at Mechanicville High School. And he texted me because their team was still in the tournament at that point. And he said, Coach, I'm hearing that the state is going to shut everything down or that it's over. What are you hearing? And I didn't even know what he was talking about at first. And I was a little puzzled, and I kind of just dismissed the text and kept going. And it couldn't have been more than maybe 5 minutes later where Mark came down into the gym and pulled us together. And there was just no way of kind of sugarcoating or put it easy. He explained, the decision that came across, and that, very likely we were done. And, to go from one extreme where the girls are incredibly excited, fresh off a road win, we have a great opportunity right in front of us. We're this close away to, that's it. It's over. It's done. That was crushing. It was painful. It was painful for the girls. I felt terrible for the parents. I mean, think about it. If you're a parent of one of those seniors and you watch, your daughter grow up and, go through the youth basketball programs and the middle school programs and, get to that point where they're right there, and possibly could achieve something really, really special. And that's it. It's over. It was painful.
Now, Sean, you obviously, and Brian, I'm sure we'll get into the success and everything like that. But what do you think, like in terms of, we know how successful your program, and obviously, Mark, you play a big part in that as well. But what do you think year after year, like what sets your program apart from other programs in terms of whether it's just the kids that come in, are the kids buying into workouts, are the kids buying into like the system? Do they love the school? Do they love you as a coach? What do you think is the number one driving factor every year?
Well, I think you really have to go back to 2005, 2006 to kind of really understand the history of our program. And that first year, I inherited 10 seniors, just incredibly tremendous, girls, Megan O'Shea, Jenna Hughes, Talitha Lindendaro, Rosie Leith, and so many more, just 10 seniors. And at that point, when I took over, they had just dropped down from the double A's to the single A's, and they were close. The year before, they had made a pretty good run, and, you could see that they were building. But when I inherited that team from June McGillifrey, who stepped down as the girls basketball coach and took over the athletic director position at Averill Park High School, there was this sense of determination, and that, we have this sense of urgency. Let's go. And, so our practices were intense. Our practices were focused. They were driven because when you play in a suburban council, you don't really have a choice. As a small school in a big school league, you can't take days off in practice because if you do, you're going to get beat. You're going to get beat bad. And then when you combine that with the sense of urgency and focus that the group of girls who I just, said came to practice every single day throughout the course of that season, then, the way that they ended up winning their first section championship. And I really believe had it not been for a key injury to Rosie Leith, who, in a sub-regional finals, dove for a loose ball with seconds left on the clock through the other team's bench and, had suffered a knee injury. If we have her the next day, I think we go to the state semifinals. Unfortunately, that year we ended up losing in the regional finals to Franklin Academy out of Malone. But something special happened that season. And that was passed down to the girls, that were coming up through our program, and they bought into our defensive philosophy, and they brought into, we're not taking time off in practice. We're going to compete. We're going to get after it. And somehow, some way, that tradition and that expectation, was passed down from the older group of girls to the next generation of players. And man, let me tell you, it's been special to watch that unfold. And when we go to practice, and I say when Coach Keegan and I go to practice every day, we feel, very strongly we have a group of girls in front of us that are ready to go. They want to be there. And we talk about that all the time. If it ever gets to the point where you feel like you have to be here versus I want to be here, there's not much success that comes from, I feel like I have to be here. And so when our girls show up and they're determined and they're ready to, get after it in practice, and we've said this for a while now, we're going to, practice how we're going to play so that when we're playing a tough suburban council game, we're going to play in that game the way that we practiced. And, from a smaller school standpoint, a suburban council, it pretty much has to be that way. Just really, really proud. I mean, I don't know how else to summarize it. I'm really, really proud, just, from one season to the next, the way that our older group of kids kind of teach those values and set those expectations to, our first or second year players, and how it continues each year. And, hopefully we can keep it rolling.
So I know early during Sean's answer to that question, I was kind of fumbling around, looked like I wasn't paying attention. I was paying attention because I was A, looking up a piece of research, and B, digging up an artifact. First, the artifact, because we were just talking about it. The 2020 Section 2 Girls Basketball Tournament Handbook. Just as a reference point for COVID, and because I'm a sicko. The second thing, the point of research I was looking up. Since Sean Organ's arrival at Averill Park, there's only 3 years that Averill Park has not won the Section 2 championship. The 06-07 season, the 08-09 season, and the 12-13 season. So essentially, and I'm being kind of facetious when I ask this, Sean, was Mark Bubniak the secret ingredient for you to just win every single year?
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. No, I if I'm being honest, when you look at the people who I've worked with, my assistant coaches, you go all the way back to 2005, 2006. I had an incredible JV coach that also, contributed a lot and would eventually become my varsity assistant coach at Mike Cavada. Below him, when we actually had freshmen and our school population was larger, Scott Keegan, who's now my current, assistant coach, Vince Gaetani, and then over the years, a number of other coaches who stayed on for 2 or 3 years before they moved on. What I've learned is that you really have to be open-minded, and you have to listen to your people. You have to listen to the people that you're working with. And when they feel strongly about something, you can't be dismissive of that. And each of those coaches have found numerous ways, to make a difference. They make a difference. Their presence with our girls makes a difference to them every single day. Scott Keegan, without a doubt, is one of the greatest people that you will ever meet. He's one of the kindest people that you'll ever meet. He is one of the hardest working people that you'll ever meet. And on top of all of that, he's a phenomenal teacher. Same could be said about Mike Cavada. And so I've learned a lot from them. There's so many things that they've taught me, and it all comes together. And I think the girls see that. I think they get that, feel from us in the way that, we work together and how enthusiastic we are about what we do, and it rubs off on them. And we're fortunate that we've had a good run.
So, let me jump into Mark coming over to Averill Park, because that seems like a seamless transition into the bold question I asked just now. So, Mark, you ended up coming over during the summer of 14, coming from the Skodak School District, where Maple Hill was. So, but you already knew about Sean. I'm not going to bring up Hal. We're going to leave that one alone, because I know there was a specific game I was told not to mention, so I'm not going to mention it. But you come over in the summer of 14. Was that something that just kind of came out of nowhere? Or was this something that you proactively were pursuing for a little while before you end up getting hired and coming over to the West Sand Lake area?
Yeah, geez. Well, to answer your question, it definitely wasn't something I was looking for. I was pretty comfortable at Maple Hill. I had been coaching varsity there for 7 years. Previous to that, I coached JV basketball for 6 years. And I started working on my admin certification probably 2013. And at Maple Hill, I was a halftime teacher. I was a halftime athletic director. I was coaching varsity basketball, so doing a lot of different things. And I always kind of had an idea I'd like to be an athletic administrator in a bigger school. And then actually, Jerry O'Shea, Meg's dad, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we have an opening here." And he was the Booster Club president at the time, and said, "Hey, we have an opening here at Averill Park. Would you be interested?" And I knew Jerry a little bit because just the previous year we had hired Meg at Maple Hill to be a PE teacher. and she was actually coaching modified basketball for 1 year when I was coaching the varsity girls over at Maple Hill. But it definitely wasn't something I was pursuing. But then when it kind of came about, and learning a little bit more about it, talking to some of the coaches I knew over here, I knew Matt Hershoff, who's the varsity boys basketball assistant. Obviously knew Coach Organ a little bit through girls basketball. Dave Puglisi lived next door to my grandparents for a long time, so I knew Dave. Talking to some of the coaches, really good district and everything. Obviously, successful athletic program. So I thought I'd, give it a shot, throw my name in the ring, and ultimately, got the job here. And it's been one of the best decisions I made. I'm going in year 11 right now. Do I miss coaching basketball? Sometimes. But I definitely get my fix, as Coach Organ knows. I probably, stop down to the gym a little more when basketball practice is going on, whether it's boys or girls. He knows I'll stop into his classroom when they're doing film work. And obviously being the Section 2 coordinator, I still get my fill of basketball and being able to talk to other coaches in the area. But, back to what you were asking Sean earlier, just being able to be here and watch what him, and in the beginning, Coach Cavada was only on the staff for 1 year when I got here. But then watching him and Coach Keegan and how they work with the younger members of our staff. We've had some movement, just like most schools do, at the modified and JV level throughout the years. But just watching those coaches be able to learn from Coach Keegan and Coach Organ, it's definitely something special. And, I would think that Coach Organ is probably the best in-season coach in all of New York State. And I'm not talking boys or girls basketball. I'm talking all sports, just to watch what they do and the practices, how structured they are. I could walk into practice. I probably know what's going to go on in that day. If you tell me what time of year it is and what game's coming up, whether it's a regular season game, whether it's a non-league game, a sectional game, I could probably tell you what he's doing in practice. But the notebook that he has, and he has one for every year because I've seen it. This year he actually left one at the score. It's like his Bible, and he left it after practice on the scorer's table. So I was looking through it one day, and just the amount of information that's in there and the amount of time him and Coach Keegan put in to prepare our girls to play in a game, and whether they're playing a team that's 20-0 or 0-20, they put in the same amount of preparation and the girls get the same information. Going back, Brian, to what you said, like the first real experience I had with Coach Organ was back in the 09-10 season when I was at Maple Hill. Obviously that was the year they went all the way on to win the Federation title. And we had a really good team at Maple Hill as well. We ended up losing in the state semifinals that year. But we went over and scrimmaged Coach Organ's team here over at Averill Park. And, I think we thought, coaches, but definitely our girls thought, hey, we were really good. We were really good. And we came over and they took us down a few notches, and we realized, hey, we have a lot to work on. We're not as good as we thought. But walking out of there, I remember I had some awesome, as Coach Organ has had, I had some awesome assistant coaches, and Brian Daly and Seth Hendrick and Mike Race. And I remember walking out of there saying, that team's really good. Like, they're going to be there at the end of the year. Hopefully we are in the C's, but they're going to be there at the end. And obviously we were right. Ultimately at the end, they went all the way and won a Federation championship. So good experiences.
Sweet. All right. Here's the deep questions. I only have one total, but so Coach Organ, if we ask one of your players to describe you and your quality as a coach, what sort of things would they say about you?
It depends on where I am. If it's in practice, I think they would probably say that I'm pretty intense, loud, lots of energy, at times probably out of my mind. If we're not in the gym, probably describe me as a little bit goofy, maybe funny. It all depends on where we're at. But I think ultimately, they know how much, Scott and I care for each kid in our program up and down. You can't be all one way or all the other all the time. You have to show different sides of who you are. And I learned a long time ago, if you try to pretend to be anything but, they're going to see through that real quick. And there's going to be that insincere, feel, which could, have an impact on the way that they play for you. So it all depends on where we're at.
So there's no good cop, bad cop with you and Scott?
Oh, no, there definitely can be good cop, bad
cop.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What's funny is there are days where every once in a while I'm actually the good cop, and Coach Keegan is having a moment or two in practice as well. And, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's interesting to see the reaction that the girls have.
It's funny that Cap asked you about what players would say about you, because I have a mystery quote for you. I'm going to read the quote that I've got from one of your former players. You're going to tell me who you think that former player is that said this quote. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Quote, Coach Organ epitomizes excellence. He strives for perfection in his coaching, and that is one of the many reasons why his teams succeed. He has taught players invaluable life lessons which are applicable to all facets of life. I am so grateful to have played under such an incredible coach. Name that former player.
Without hesitation, Michelina Lombardi.
That was my guess as well.
Her quotes are so easy to point out because of the wide vocabulary, I suppose.
Yeah, Mick is, she's always had the ability to communicate with a wide variety of people. Doesn't matter if it was her teammate, a coach. I think one of the funniest stories that I could share with you is in 2022, when we were being honored down in the New York State Senate. We had arrived early, and the Senate was still kind of gathering and assembling in the chamber. And within probably 10 minutes or less of being there, Michelina had already made her way down and was speaking with a couple different representatives. I think one of them was from Long Island, and they were discussing policy and different things of New York State government. 20 minutes later, she's meeting with somebody who I think was a representative from the Buffalo, Rochester area as well. People who she's never met, but she's an incredible, extraordinary young woman, and the work ethic and the drive that she had. Again, that's another reason why we've had the success that we've had up at Averill Park, because of student athletes like Mick.
So when she becomes Governor Lombardi or President Lombardi, should we expect you two to be in the cabinet for her?
She and I have definitely had some political banter over the years, for sure. But I'm sincere when I say this. I think that, if she ever decided to enter into politics, it would not surprise me someday if we turn on the TV and see that she's a president of the United States, because she's that focused, she's that sharp, and she's that driven. But we're proud of her, and we're proud of all the kids that we've been able to coach over the years.
Hey, you won't have to worry about questionable food at any of her events, because her family could just cater everything. Perfect. She's got everything set. I mean, what more do you need? So one thing sorry, Cap.
No, you're good. No, go ahead.
I'm jumping on one thing, because obviously you mentioned, Sean, you got your undergrad at St. Rose. Mark, you actually got your master's at St. Rose. So you're both graduates in different ways from St. Rose. Obviously, they just closed, had their last academic year end back in May. Both you can jump in on this. Your thoughts on the closure and the legacy you feel that the school leaves behind after closing down.
I'll just say a few things here, just because obviously, I got my master's there. Coach Organ had, as an undergrad and then playing on the basketball team there, he probably feels a little bit more of a connection. I'm sure he does, with Coach Bury and all members of the basketball staff there. But, just in general, it's a sad time to lose one of our major institutions in the Albany area, especially in that neighborhood up there. It'd be weird driving by there and, just not knowing what's going to happen to those buildings and those facilities. And as I'm sure Coach Organ could speak of, all the important memories that he has, and from all the athletic teams. When I was at Maple Hill, Megan Arno was one of our basketball players, but her main sport was soccer, and she was part of the national championship soccer team over at St. Rose a few years back there. So a lot of great memories, but I'll really let Coach Organ speak to that.
So, whether it was professors, whether it was, the sisters, whether it was, for example, Mike Long, who, coached Coach Bury, and huge credit to Mike Long and establishing what he did, and then Coach Bury extending that. The thing about St. Rose is that it was a very community, very family feel when I was there, and just instantly loved it as soon as I stepped on campus, and continue to do so. And the support, the way that you could go to your professors and work with them, their doors were always open there. The way that the different sports athletic teams supported each other. I know that any one of our home games, you'd have pretty much the entire baseball program at St. Rose up in those bleachers, acting as the sixth man in that old, gymnasium that we used to play in. Just the family community feel of that campus, it'll never be replaced. It is very sad to see it go. It's very disappointing that, that's the situation that the campus and the college ended up, being in. And, it's just, it'll never be duplicated, to be honest with you. And the time that I had there, it was very special, and the people and the connections that I made through the College of St. Rose is still a big part of who I am today as a teacher and as a coach.
I've been to a few of those games. I luckily was you're not that much older, but I was a kid in the stands as my father was refereeing, so I was front and center to a lot of those games, whether it be like CW Post games, Queens College games. I was there for a little bit of a fight with, I think that broke out with the point guard afterwards. Actually was getting popcorn, and I think I was like 10 years old, and turned around, and one of the Damons was behind me, and I'm like, oh, this is good. Malloy used to be a battle, things like that. So that those kind of games used to be fun to watch. So
yeah, I mean, we've had some incredible rivals like Adelphi.
Yep.
The games that we played against Adelphi were always probably, just the peak of those old NE10, the NICAC, conference we used to play in. And, I mean, you talk about, Steve Scambolori, who's over, at LaSalle now, and he was, my teammate at St. Rose, and just another incredible, coach and basketball player. He had a huge shot, over at UAlbany to, help us win the regional championship against Adelphi there. So yeah, and I think I might remember, Coach, the game that you're referring to that occurred in our gym. I think if I remember correctly, that was against NJIT, and just, how physical that conference was, and how intense those games were. And just when you played it on your gym, in that old gym that we used to play on, it just, again, it'll never be duplicated.
Let me guess, Mike Perno probably started the fight.
Probably not. I think if that happened, Coach Perno would not be in the middle of that. I think that was, Greg Saunders, an old teammate of mine at St. Louis, graduated a year before me. Greg was physical, and, the one thing I can tell you about Greg is Greg always had his teammates back, and just, didn't like the way a play unfolded, and made sure to let the other team know about it. And that's just who Greg was. Greg was a tough, rugged, I always had my teammates back, and, fond memories for sure.
We had a pretty tough team anyway. Dan Haver, and your point guard was Matt Fryer, who I still think would, if I wouldn't want to get in a fight with him at any point. He's out there. So
yeah, Danny. So Danny is probably the best leader of any team that I've ever played for. When you think about leadership, and you think about, you can't be concerned about you got to do what's in the best interest of the team, always team first. Danny epitomized that leadership. I love playing with Danny. I love being his teammate, because it was always about us. was never about I, never about me. It was, and if Danny ever sensed that we had a player, on our team starting to head in that direction, in Danny's way, he would communicate, with you and let you know that, that's not what we're about. And you talk about Matt Fryer. Matt Fryer was just everything that we needed at St. Rose, defensively oriented, not afraid to get up and defend somebody, from baseline to baseline, just courageous, fearless, and inspiring. And the way his energy, the way that he played, he was an incredible point guard. And you talk about, Damon Reed, who I graduated with. Damon Reed was just a phenomenal, All-American basketball player. And a lot of people, I don't think that too many people recognize how special the team was the year before I got there, because not only did you have Garth Joseph, but you also had a 6'10" Damon Reed,
right,
who's out there. And how do you defend that? And, so I consider myself very fortunate that I had the opportunity to walk on and just be on that floor, with those group of guys. You talk about Perno, you talk about Fryer, you talk about Jason Barito, you talk about Nate Connolly, you talk about, Steve Scambolori, Steve Dorn, who graduated from, Colony and now is an administrator down at, Ravenna School District. Just great guys, hardworking guys, focus and the just the brotherhood, the camaraderie that we had with each other. There was a reason why we had success when we were playing in the late 90s.
By the way, quick side note about Mike Perno. I knew he was an assistant under Brian Bury before he became head coach for a few years. But the first time I actually met him in person, he was a crappy adult beer league softball umpire. And you can tell him that I called him crappy next time you see him. It's a constant thing we talk about how, it was.
But let me tell you, as bad of an umpire he might have been, he could shoot the ball. Man, that guy shoot the ball. It didn't matter where he was, he could shoot the ball.
So I've got a list of people that from the Averill Park community I just want to run through real quick, and you can both jump in with your thoughts on them. I'm going to go with people that are still within the community, and then a couple that are not anymore. First being, I got to bring up Rachel Brown real quick. I feel like she's it's like anytime I see Marker Sean, there's Rachel right behind with her trainer bag. Like it's a never-ending thing. Like if there's three things guaranteed for me in the months of February, March, it's Mark Bubniak, Sean Organ, Rachel Brown. That's it. And the rest is just kind of filler for me. But talk about what Rachel means with being the athletic trainer over there at AP and what she's able to do for the girls and for the coaches and administrators as well.
Oh man, she's awesome. Talk about somebody who loves her job and it shows. And she's so patient, with all the student athletes there, especially the girls basketball team. I feel like we give her way more work than she probably needs. But and I know Mark can talk about Rachel probably a little bit better than I can, but I can tell you it is a relief to have Rachel on the sideline and at our practices and taking care of the things that she does so well. We're really fortunate that we have her.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel's going into her 7th year here. It's amazing how quickly it goes by. And her first year here, she was actually with Top Form, and we actually contracted them. And then we were able to, in our budget, get a full-time athletic trainer here. So for the past 6 years, she's actually been one of our employees, and probably one of the best. I shouldn't say probably the best hire we've made since I've been here. She just does an awesome job. She's available 24/7. She's responsive, keeps up to date with everything, takes stuff off of my plate. She does other things besides just being the athletic trainer. She handles all of our coaching certifications, any special accommodations we need from NISFA. She handles that. She handles all of our uniform inventory. So she does a really great job doing a lot of different things. For the first 6 years of her career here, Her office was, if you've ever been to Averill Park, you walk in the side entrance like you're going into the gym, and there's two little small rooms there that were really designed to be like a coach's office and an official's office with a shared bathroom in the middle. Well, ultimately, that ended up being her office and a training room, which was probably like a 5x5. Both were like 5x6, 5x7 rooms, very small rooms that definitely didn't do her job justice. So with some moving around last summer, we're able to find one of the classrooms for her. And now she's got a full-size training room and office and a classroom, cabinets. I mean, I would say it's probably one of the better training rooms in all of Section 2 and probably rivals some, small college training rooms. But if anybody deserved a new space to be able to do what they do, it's definitely her. And she doesn't like taking any credit for anything. She doesn't like the limelight. Funny story, we hosted the Group 2 track sectionals here in May. And early that morning, it was a really hot day. Going to deal with heat index issues, hydration, all of those things. And Spectrum News called and asked if they could come out around noon that day and interview me to talk about the precautions we were taking. I said, I'd be fine with that. But who I'd really rather have you interview is our athletic trainer. So call Rachel early that morning. Hey, make sure you dress well. You're going to be on TV. She wasn't too happy with me putting her on TV, but obviously she did a great job. But she's the expert, and our coaches, they respect her tremendously. If there's thunder or lightning and they get the call on the radio to get off the field, they're right off the field. If it's a heat index issue, they're corresponding with her throughout the day. And, specific with girls basketball, since Sean's on the podcast here, I mean, Rachel's job is Monday through Friday with some weekend hours. But I think as Sean can attest and the girls basketball players can attest, Rachel's job during the girls basketball season, especially this past year, was a 7-day-a-week job. And, meeting players here on Saturday, being here before practice on Sunday. And I think as Mrs. Houlihan would say, Rachel specifically got Taylor and Tot through the entire girls basketball season this year. So much credit to her.
I know Cap has a quick question, but because you transitioned perfectly into one thing I was thinking about. Considering it's been 4.5 months, I think I can finally ask you two about this. I walk in for the sub-regional Class B game for Academy, and I literally, Mark, you know exactly what I'm about to mention because you were the one that witnessed me do this. I walk in, and I'm looking right at Monica sitting at the admission table, and I look to my left, and here's Taylor on crutches after a practice. So, Sean, I'm assuming you were in the gym for this. What happened with this very secretive thing that I couldn't talk about and did not talk about, by the way, kept it to myself. But what happened? Because I know, you eventually end up I know the regional game that weekend, she played limited minutes because honestly, you didn't need her that much in that game. And then you want to make sure she was good for the state semis. What even happened that day?
So I think most coaches know when you get to that point in the season, you really start to trim down the length of your practices. You're playing March basketball. It's been a long season. So the length of our practice was shortened, during that stretch. The kids kind of obviously start to lose focus a little bit. You've been harping and teaching and pushing in practice, for 4.5 months. So there's a number of different things, but you still as a coach have to find certain things in practice to keep them sharp, to keep them focused. And we were quite literally about 5 to 10 minutes away from being completed with practice. And we were finishing up a defensive drill, a simple, basic defensive drill. And there just happened to be a loose ball where Taylor got tangled up awkwardly, with another player, and she went down, and, it was clear that she was hurt, and we didn't know exactly what. And everybody held her breath. I know the teammate who she got tangled up with, felt really, really bad about it. Not that it was her fault at all, because it wasn't. It was just a basketball play. And thankfully, we had Rachel right there, and we got Taylor down to the trainer's room, who, was working with Tot, because Tot, was having some, injury issues at that point. So I had both Taylor and Tot, in the training room, not really knowing, what their status was. And, the initial fear that we have with Taylor is that she might have had some kind of fracture, in her ankle or lower leg area. We've actually had a player graduate a couple years ago who suffered that injury that initially Rachel thought Taylor might have had. And so we were all holding our breath, and it was really that 24 to 48 hour window, that really told Rachel a lot of what she needed to know. And, just her experience, in her profession, and, the way that she went about it, she was able to get Taylor, obviously it wasn't fractured. She was able to get Taylor back, to full strength. And you see the way that Taylor played in the state semifinal game, that we lost in overtime. You would never have guessed about a week and a half earlier. We didn't even know if she was going to play another high school game.
Yeah, and I would just say, I was sitting at the scorer's table at the time, waiting for, because as Sean said, it was right at the end of practice, and waiting for, we were hosting the sub-regional game that night, and waiting for us to clear out the gym so I could, get ready for that game. And I wasn't looking at the play, and all of a sudden I heard Sean say, "Get Rachel," and I look over, and it's Taylor on the ground, and obviously with some tears and everything. And so I get Rachel on the radio, and just watching Taylor hobble out of there, I wouldn't have guessed that she was going to be able to play on Saturday. But again, going back to Rachel, and give credit to Taylor, Taylor did everything Rachel told her to do. I mean, they were texting back and forth, whether it be 10:30 at night, 5:30 in the morning. Rachel would be texting with Taylor, and then Rachel would send me, Coach Organ, and Coach Keegan an update. And our superintendent, Dr. Franchini, who's very into sports, made sure he was updated right afterwards. And I was giving him updates. I go, I think she might be okay. I think she's going to be good, things like that. But I know Sean was a little hard on himself. It was the end of practice. Should she have been out there? But I will say, I think that's one of the things that makes Averill Park and makes Coach Organ who it is. There's no off days in practice. There's no off periods in practice. Anytime I walk in that gym, every girl in there is going as hard as they can, whether it's day one or the day before a state semifinal game. If there's a loose ball, they're diving on the loose ball. No matter whether it's, Division I scholarship player Taylor Houlihan or the 12th person on the team, they're all doing the same thing. And that's why they're successful.
Now I'll make you guys be at least give me an answer, at least if you can. If you want to be kind of politically correct, you can too. But so, Coach Mark, you can go first, and then Coach Organ can think about it. But if you could take any player from the time that Coach Organ, you've started at Averill Park, and brought them back to be on your team this year, who would it be?
Oh, boy. Who would I bring back to put on Coach Organ's team this year? I'm gonna go back to one of my first few years here at Averill Park. One of my favorite players was Sam Laranjo, and Sam, point guard, and just she was on those teams back then where we would seem to run into Jamesville DeWitt every regional round, and Jamesville DeWitt for the most part would go on to win the state championship. And there was a lot of times we thought we were probably the second best team in the state, but ultimately just ran into a better team, the number one team in Jamesville DeWitt. But Sam was, just going back to what I said about always being a tough player, diving on the floor, being a leader, all those things. I kind of respected those things in my first few years here at Averill Park, watching her play. So I would say her.
This is a tough one, Coach. You're going to get me in some trouble. I know that when this podcast airs, I'm going to get some text messages from, I got 20 years worth of players. So there's no right answer here. And you're basically asking me, which child do I love the most? But here's what I'll tell you. I think, honestly, I would probably make it Belly Lang, who graduated a year earlier. And the reason is because I felt like Belly, with this current group of players who also just graduated with this group, very much unfinished business. And when you think about the team that we ran up against and the player who really, dominated the early and middle portion of that game in the state semifinal that we just lost, I would have loved to have seen Belly Lang match up on that point guard, because Belly prided herself on her defense. And she is probably one of the most underrated players that I've ever coached. And I try to get people to understand that Bailey was like a 20, 25 point per game player. She prided herself on going out, matching up against, somebody who, averaged, gaudy numbers, 20, 22 points per game and holding them well below average. But Bailey also got it going offensively too. And, I know that Belly was devastated, when we lost the season before to Panis in that, semifinal game. And I know that she would have given anything to have just one more shot at it. And I would have liked that matchup, for us, to be honest with you. And I think that if she's out there on our roster for this past season, I think we find a way to get through that game.
Well, I'm going to have a little recency bias. I have a different answer from both of you. I'm going to go with Amelia Wood. Which is funny because Sacred Heart, it's their first year in the MAC, and instead of having to go down to Sacred Heart, you can just watch her play when she's at Siena on February 15th. Well, there'll be a massive Section 2 invasion into the gymnasium at the UHY Center. All right. I mentioned I want to talk about a couple of different people from the AP community. This is a pair. They are I should amend what I said earlier about the months of February and March, because there's 5 things that are undeniable. The two of you, Rachel Brown, and then Scott Reynolds and Mike Conroy. Certainly characters and a half in their own rights. Mark, I'll let you take the lead on this one. How do you tolerate those two, man?
I give them a lot of Section 2 gear and Averill Park gear, and they kind of stay out of my hair. No, those guys are awesome guys. I think, let's see, this is my 11th year here, so this is probably going into year 8 for them being together on the, Mike doing the scoreboard and Coach Reynolds doing the shot clock. And those guys are retired now. They were both longtime PE teachers and coaches in our district, and they still come back to do the clock for boys and girls games. And obviously anything we host for sectionals, and then as you see them at Hudson Valley during sectionals, regionals, and the state tournament. And Coach Reynolds, he lives up in Schuylerville. So he comes down on Tuesdays and Fridays down here every Tuesday and Friday in the winter to do the shot clock. But if you come to a game at Averill Park, you probably see where I sit. And it's usually right next to the scorer's table, because I still like to be part of it. I like to hear Sean and Scott and what they're saying to the girls. But it's also the comedy session sitting next to Coach Reynolds and Coach Conroy. Most of the stuff they talk about and say, I probably can't say on this. This is the PG-rated show probably. But those guys, they'll be timeouts. They'll set the clock. And next thing you know, they're playing Battleship against each other on their phones. And then I'll have to hit one of them and say, hey, they're back on the court. They're ready to go. But those guys are definitely, along with Rachel, Coach Organ, Coach Pugs on the boys' side, if you walk into a gym for a basketball game at Averill Park, they're two of the more familiar faces you're going to see. And I got another 13, 14 years here before I can retire. Hopefully I can convince them to stay just as long, just like Coach Organ, to stay just as long until I'm done, because they're great people.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that, because that's 2 less things I have to worry about the score table for 4 weeks, 6 weeks out of the year. Because let's just.
And I know it's the sectional games, Brian, and you know this because you sit right next to them. I'm sure you've heard some conversations as well, but they're concerned with a lot of things. It's not anything to do with on the court. They're concerned with, are the strawberry candies sitting here?
Or am I playing the right music that they're requesting?
Are you playing the right music? Yeah. Or where are they going afterwards to eat? Nothing to do with basketball, but.
Yeah, if you're Hudson Valley, I know they're always asking about, you walking to juniors and then walking home after that. So, yeah, they're interesting. They're like the Abbott and Costello of AP basketball. But, anyways, now the one person I'd like to have both of you comment on is actually, because you mentioned them both being retired, somebody that just left Averill Park after this school year, Monica Shoup. Actually just moved down to Tennessee recently. She was terrific, but very much behind the scenes, but she wasn't that behind the scenes. You still saw her face almost everywhere you went involving AP basketball. And she was also a tremendous ambassador that went and saw some of the girls play at their various colleges as well. Just talk a little bit about Monica, what she meant to the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, she's been here. She was here 8 years. So, and somebody in that position, you usually don't get to stay for that long. But heck, she had to put up with me. I mean, for 8 years, and I'm not the easiest person to deal with. But she made my job and our coaches' jobs, and not only them, but whether it's Rachel or working with the transportation department, working with the business office, working with buildings and grounds. She had her hand in everything. And what most people don't know is one of the parts of her job was, and same thing with the person that just took over for Monica, they handled building usage for the entire district. So the high school, the middle school, all 3 elementary schools, George Washington School, which we leased to Questar, all the fields, all the buildings, they approve or not approve any group, whether it's an internal user, youth organization, community education, or just some random group that wants to rent our facility. She handled all of that, along with doing everything, transportation for athletics, schedules, senior nights, banquets, making sure they were all organized. And Sean will probably speak to this, but he was one of our first coaches to start a teacher appreciation night. And she took that and ran with it. And I would always tell her, Monica, if these coaches want to start these things, let them do it all. They can create the program. They can invite the teachers. But nope, Monica set the precedent. Coach Organ just kind of decides he wants to do it, and she did all the work. I'm sure he can kind of speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, so Monica is such a special person to not just the girls basketball program, but all the programs. Specific to our program, she was fantastic in the way that she communicated and the way that she organized our teacher recognition or educator recognition night. I remember meeting with her initially when we decided to go forward with this, and I had my ideas. I had, what I thought would be a really good ceremony. And, Monica has a way of adding and just making it so much better. And she puts her touch on things. And, every time I would see her, oh, by the way, I decided that, we were going to add this to it. And I think that this, and just her touch and the way that she organized and went through that first, teacher recognition night, we had teachers with tears in their eyes as they were being recognized by, one of our student athletes. Just incredible what she did. And, she was there. She is there. She was there early in the morning. And then, there were times where, she actually left later, than some of the coaches, did, 9:30 at night. She was all in, and that's probably what stands out most about Monica is that she was all in. It was more than just a job for her. When you see the pictures of her with the girls, with the Wood sisters down at Sacred Heart, right? the way that she supported the various student athletes at the football games, the soccer teams, the softball teams, the baseball teams, you know, and how she helps them with their ceremonies. You know, Monica was all in, and we were very, very lucky to have her. And we're going to miss her, but, you know, we're going to miss her dearly.
And I will say one of the things that people probably then they wouldn't know about her, and only probably I would, maybe a few select people, maybe a few of our coaches, me and Rachel, is, you know, Monica was a 10-month employee, so she had the school breaks off, any days that teachers had off, she had off. Summers off, yes. Would she come in some days for the summer and get paid for those? Sure. But man, she did a lot of stuff on her own time. You know, whether it was approving, you know, building usage from home, because I get the emails that would come through at 9, 10 at night, or texting with coaches that was not part of her job description at all, but she would still do that. And I you know, I think our coaches, and myself included, were very spoiled by that. And Jess Haskin, the person who took Monica's job, was sitting right outside the door here right now. I've told her from the beginning, don't do stuff when you're at home. Don't respond when you're not at home. It's not your job. So, but she's already starting to do that as well. So Monica taught her well.
I actually have 2 more quick questions for Sean. Well, one might not be so quick, but the non-basketball related one I want to bring up. As somebody who is always purveying Facebook, I can't help but bring up this passion you seem to have for photography, because I personally love seeing all the different shots that you keep getting, especially with the recent storms. Wild pictures. Mm-hmm. Where did that passion evolve from with your photography?
I think it's kind of a culmination of things that all came together probably about 8 or 10 years ago. You know, I've always had this fascination with atmospheric science and meteorology and the weather. You know, I can remember when I was, I mean, probably even younger than 5, you know, we had, where I grew up in Southwesterlo, just a horrific thunderstorm, knocked down a ton of trees, snapped telephone poles. We were without power for a few days. You know, it just kind of stayed with me. I've always had this weird fascination with it. There was a time in high school where I thought maybe that was a career that I wanted to pursue. But to add the advanced math and the advanced science, you know, I just wasn't sure if that was the right move for me. And I would, when I had time, go out and try to see it as it was happening. And I would tell my wife about, you know, the different things that I would go out and see and observe. I volunteer for the National Weather Service. I'm one of their trained spotters. So ground truth to them is really important. You know, radar and their tools can only give them so much. You know, they need to have, you know, what they call ground truth. And I would explain to my wife what I'd see. For Christmas a few years back, she surprised me with a camera, and she said, "Hey, listen, you know, I know that you have this love for it. You're always telling me about what you see. Why don't you try this, you know, take some pictures." And, you know, there's a mentor who I have. He's a professional photographer. His name is John Bulmer, just a total pro. And he was kind enough to give me, you know, some useful tips very early on, you know, about things that I should do and things that I should try. And, you know, what I found is, you know, when I'm out there, I'm not thinking about too much else. You know, there's a lot when you're a teacher and when you're a coach, you know, and then you throw in all the, you know, things that your kids are involved in. It's hectic. It's a hectic lifestyle right now. And, you know, that's my time just to go out and not really think about anything else. I know some people love exercising. You know, some of my friends, you know, love the track this time of year. That's their kind of their, you know, escape. You know, people do different things. That's kind of my escape, you know, when I get out there. And, you know, you throw in my experiences as a first responder too. And, you know, some of the things that those guys see and go through, it's an outlet, you know, you know, where you kind of get away from things a little bit. And I really appreciate the opportunity, whether it's a simple sunrise, sunset, you know, whether I'm in a different county, just shooting some storms, you know, it's a healthy hobby that I really enjoy. And, you know, what I didn't anticipate is, you know, a lot of people who, you know, follow social media, you know, appreciate it. They kind of like it, you know, and if I go a period of time without posting something, I start to get these little messages. Hey, is everything okay? You know, you know, we're gonna get some storms coming in soon. You know, you're gonna be out there, and no, I appreciate that, but it's just something that I really enjoy, and it's kind of a temporary escape.
So not only, Brian, is he a state championship coach, but he's a weatherman, a photographer, and a firefighter. So, like, I'm not sure what else we can even do to
I actually, after 20 years, I just submitted my resignation, you know, to the fire department. It's to the point where I don't think that people really truly understand how much time and devotion, you know, a volunteer firefighter gives to their community. And over the last 3, 4, 5 years, now that my, you know, two kids are growing up and are in the thick of, you know, travel sports, you know, I was getting to training and drills less and less and less. And it just, you know, I started way back in 2004 at the small department up in Saratoga County. You know, and, you know, for 20 years, you know, I tried to serve my community. I think it's important. I think it's important for coaches and teachers and anybody else to kind of do those things, because if not us, then who, right? If not us, you know, who's going to be there? But it just got to the point where, as much as I love being in the department and volunteering and serving my community, you know, I just didn't have the time to devote to the training that is required and very necessary and important. So I already missed those guys, you know, over at Bout Fire Department, but they're in great hands and they're top notch.
The one thing I'll say, and because Sean probably won't say it, but I know he won't say it, but you know, 99% of the people probably outside of the Averill Park community, if they see Sean Organ's name or something about him, it's probably associated with girls basketball here at Averill Park. But Sean's also an outstanding social studies teacher here at Averill Park. Does a terrific job in the classroom. And the one other thing is, if we have a medical emergency in the building, there's 3 people that usually get called first. Our school nurse, Val Miller, Rachel, our athletic trainer, and Sean. Those are the 3 people that get called. So he does a great job among not just basketball.
The last thing I wanted to bring up quick, and Sean, you actually made reference to this. Your 2 kids. I know your son was doing a bunch of travel baseball. You're about to go to Albany for your girls' softball camp, I believe it is. Are they going to keep playing on grass and dirt? Or are you going to push them to the hardwood at any point? Get them to become Warriors or Golden Knights, excuse me, for like the year 2033 or something like that.
So my son is definitely the travel baseball player. He loves that, you know, and he made the decision, you know, to come to Averill Park. Fortunately, we have that as part of our contract with the Teachers Association up at Averill Park. So, you know, and when he came here, he very quickly connected with Coach Brooks, Coach Duff, Coach Larkin. And he just loves baseball. That's his passion. That's what he enjoys. You know, we're getting ready to head on down to Connecticut for our 2nd weekend in a row of a travel, you know, baseball tournament. But it makes him happy, and he puts a ton of work and effort into it. And my daughter is the basketball player. You know, she's explored other sports, soccer, volleyball, but she loves basketball. And you know, she had a tough decision to make. You know, she kind of saw all the really great things that Shane went through at Algonquin Middle School, which is just a phenomenal middle school. You know, Mr. Messier and all the staff and teachers in that school make that, you know, a great place for those kids to be in our district. And, you know, over the course of the year, you know, that kind of rubbed off on Kira, and Kira would come up to our practices, and she sat with us, you know, for many of our games this season. You know, she had experience, you know, with some of our players, and, you know, it all kind of came together. And, you know, she made for both of them, it was their decision, which I love. But, you know, she made the decision that next year she'll be going to Averill Park as well. And, someday, if everything lines up, hopefully, I can coach her as well. And we'll see how that goes.
And when Sean told me that Kira was coming, as much as we're excited if that's where Kira wants to be, the first thing I did was I shook his hand and I said, congratulations, you have a 6-year contract extension because we'll know you'll be coaching basketball for at least girls basketball for at least 6 more years.
Well, gentlemen, I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed having you both on. When it came to having a coach and administrator on together, you two were obviously the ones I would think of first because I see y'all for 6 months every year, it seems like. So, Sean, obviously a great job. By the way, congratulations on your induction last year into the New York State Basketball Hall of Fame. Forgot to bring that up, but we had so much to talk about that kind of slipped through. But congratulations, Sean, on that. Best of luck coming up this year. And Mark, you make things too easy for me. So, you say Monica does too much for you. You do too much for me. Just you chill during sectionals. It's okay. But thank you both very much. And we'll definitely, we'll obviously be in touch as we get closer to basketball season. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. I really appreciate that you thought of us. Thank you.
Absolutely, not a problem. That was Mark Bubniak and Sean Organ, respectively the athletic director and girls varsity basketball coach for Averill Park. Cap, I know we're a little up against it because you actually have work to do. What work? What's work? But just quick thoughts on the conversation overall.
No, it was great insight. We knew the Averill Park community is a strong one, and that's. I also don't think Coach Organ gives himself enough credit for the kids, the way the kids play. There's a reason the kids play like that. It's because they're taught like that at a young age. When they come watch the games, and the stands are filled at girls' games. If anyone wants to see what a girls' gym should look like during a girls' game, go to an Averill Park game. And sometimes we'll get more than the boys' games even get. So he has to give himself enough credit as to why those kids play that hard. It's a big part of him. And when you have a supporting athletic director like he has as well at Averill Park, and the sky's the limit. So
if I find a way, I might have to clip the last 20 seconds of what you said about the gym being filled for the girls' games and just play that on loop at some point.
Sure.
But any Hoosier, you get to work. That's the end of episode 17. At 84 Feet Podcast on Twitter, 84 Feet Podcast at gmail.com, and search for 84 Feet with Cady and Cap on Facebook. You take your purple hat, get out of here. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.